Welcome to Trinity Senate. I'm Joe and I'm the dad.
And I'm Raya and I'm the daughter.
I had quite a time trying to set up a new password.
Yeah?
So I tried to put it in and it said, must be 8 characters.
Uh-huh.
I put in Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs.
In doing this podcast, we hear from all kinds of people, and sometimes there are people that have some very negative, very toxic viewpoints on things. One of the criticisms that we will sometimes hear about the LGBTQ plus community, and maybe you have heard this as well, if you've been around and had these conversations with people, they'll say, well, being gay or being lesbian, it's unnatural. Well, first of all, it doesn't matter whether it's natural or unnatural anyway, because going to the movies is unnatural. Driving a car is unnatural. I mean, we do lots of things that are not natural. Being natural doesn't necessarily make it better, and being, quote, unnatural doesn't make it worse. But when you look at the animal kingdom, you find actually there's lots of evidence that, in fact, it is very natural.
Let's go back to one of our closest relatives, bonobos. Oh, and let's not forget about chimpanzees. They're kind of a lot the same, although bonobos are actually our closest relatives. Chimpanzees are second. And I think I've heard it said that over 98% of the DNA of both of those animals is the same as ours.
Wow.
Their DNA is very, very close to ours.
I would believe that, yeah.
But we take a look at what kind of LGBTQ plus things occur in the animal world, and let's look first at these animals, at the bonobo and at the chimpanzees. And I will tell you, we found some interesting things. Will you take a look at female to female? Yes, they do. It's very common that they have genital rubbing. Male to male, they have genital contact. Mounting between the same sex partners is very common. Kissing and genital play and mutual stimulation occurs very often. These behaviors are so common and serve social purposes such as bonding and reducing tension within the whole group, which is interesting. Some studies estimate that 60% of sexual activity among female bonobos occurs with other females.
You got to watch out when you go to the zoo. The gay bonobos are at it again.
Well, I think we ought to go tomorrow. So it really is social rather than reproductive sex that they're talking about here. Chimpanzees, the same thing. Male to male mounting is very common. Same-sex genital stimulation is common. Sexual activity during alliance formation or conflict resolution is really common. And studies estimate that around 1/3 of mountings in certain groups occurs between males. That's in the chimpanzee world. That's considerably higher than it is among Homo sapiens, which is very interesting. It is a very common practice, so it's something that's natural in the animal world.
There's got to be a joke in there about Homo sapiens and homosexual and something. I feel like there's something in there that would be pro.
Well, if you come up with it, let us know.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with gorillas. Female to female mounting is common. Male to male sexual activity is very, very common. Courtship displays and vocalizations accompany the behavior. Now we're talking about lesbian and gay activities among those groups. Why does it happen? They think it happens because it really strengthens the alliances of the group. It also is used in conflict resolution, so it can diffuse aggression. And it also is when some of the older primates are teaching the younger ones to learn sexual behavior through same-sex interactions, which I find really fascinating. Environmental stress is more common in species with complex social hierarchies or harsh environments.
Right. And then when we look at what the research is coming out and saying, you also see actually an equivalent of being transgender as well, where you see
Yes, you do.
animals, quote unquote, acting like the other sex. You see role reversal, mounting, females mounting other females or males, grooming, vocalizations or displays normally associated with one sex that is picked up by the other sex. You find long-term same-sex partnerships observed especially in primates, but also in birds, dolphins, and others. So scientists generally avoid labeling animals as transgender because gender identity is not something that we really know how to measure in animals. But the point is, if you can observe whatever we mean when we're talking about transgender issues among the animal kingdom, you see those things. Whatever we're trying to measure, whatever we're looking for, we end up seeing that. It's not unnatural at all. In fact, it's very natural.
And often people will say if it occurs in the animal world and it's natural, period. So that would be natural in the world of Homo sapiens as well.
Right. Same-sex behavior is just not rare in nature. Scientists have documented in over 1,500 species, including our closest relatives, as you talked about, bonobos, chimpanzees. How do you pronounce this one?
I don't know.
Macaques. Macaques. I don't know.
These are monkey types in Japan.
Yeah, gorillas. In many primates, these behaviors help build friendships, reduce conflict, and strengthen social bonds.
Right.
But we don't want you to just take our word for it. We wanted to bring in somebody that is an expert. Now, this is actually an interview that we did over 3 years ago, with a close friend of yours who has the professional experience to know what the scientific literature is saying.
Yes. This is Dr. Pete Gasper, and Dr. Gasper has been involved in animal work all of his life, and he has quite a resume.
He served as a veterinary biomedical scientist and professor for 20 years between Ohio State University, Colorado State University, and the University of Maryland. So he's well respected within his field. He has also served as an animal welfare expert. So he was the chief of comparative medicine with the National Institute on Aging's intramural research program. He was the director of the University of Alberta's Medical School's Laboratory Animal Medicine program, and he was the founder and chief of a biomedical research consulting business. He also then practiced and continues to practice as a clinical accredited veterinarian. So we asked him a few years ago, would you come in, would you do some of the research, would you take a look and see, we're not looking for you to present independent research here, would you just sum up what's going on, what's the state of the discipline right now in veterinary sciences on LGBTQ issues in animals? And so he went out and did a bunch of the research, and we had a very interesting conversation with him.
And we would like to play that conversation that we had right after this.
Hi, I'm Andy Barrett, a Lutheran pastor and a supporter of this podcast. I see Transcendent as a ministry. I've pointed many people toward these recorded conversations full of so much heart and care and warmth, as well as some of Joe's jokes, which are hands down the worst part of this podcast. But even they make me smile. I'm one of the many genuinely blessed by Transcendent, and I encourage you to join me in supporting this podcast by giving as little as $3 a month. Go to transcendent.com and click support.
If you simply were to Google homosexuality in animals, there's actually a singular page that shows up. And I think they mention, like 400 and some species in which homosexuality has been documented.
Mm-hmm.
If it occurs in animals, it's natural. So the curse of humans is that we think we're exceptional. So it's like American exceptionalism. We, in essence, have human being exceptionalism. And we think we're special, but we're not.
And so, really, what I'm hearing you say is that when people say, oh, well, homosexuality, that's not natural, that is more people projecting onto reality what they wish reality was and trying to say, this is my idealized version, but it doesn't actually match with the reality of what we see.
Right. You're spot
nature.
on that, I'm sitting here with two substantial scientific papers about, one is titled Sexual Partner Preference in Animals and Humans, and another one is titled The Neurobiology of Gender Identity and Sexual Orientation. Societal acceptance of homosexuality lags behind the science.
And so, so tell us a little bit about these papers here. So now this is not your area of study, but you are well equipped to study this because of your background. So you know where to go, you know how to do the research.
I mean, it's something that the genetics of homosexuality. And so I drew a little Venn diagram here in which what the science shows is that there are kind of three main things that go into the recipe for homosexuality.
And for those of you, I don't think I have any way to post this online, but for those of you that can't see it, which is every one of you, what we're seeing here is a diagram with three overlapping circles. Sometimes you'll see the Venn diagrams where they don't all overlap, but in this case, all three are overlapping, so you have a middle section that contains part of all three. So tell us,
and in
tell
that
us what's
middle
in each
section,
circle.
I wrote LGBTQ.
Okay.
So the three components are hormones, specifically testosterone, during gestation. The second circle is genetics and the influence of androgens and environment on the genetics, and we call that epigenetics. And then the final is the environment, specifically congenics or older brothers. For example, in the hormones, if you were a mad scientist and wanted to create homosexual rats, what you do is you inject them with testosterone at a critical time during pregnancy. And you'll end up with a total litter of homosexual rats.
And so you're saying that we've discovered that there is absolutely then a cause for it that we can see going back to those earliest times of formation.
Right. That, if you look at mysteries and puzzles to be solved, one of the biggest puzzles in biology is gestation, or what we call developmental biology. So developmental biology is a term that's given for studying what happens between the time that a sperm and egg unite, which is two cells, and then I'm sitting here as a community of about 40 trillion cells. And so at a given time during gestation...
Don't sell yourself short.
So at a given stage of gestation, it's just a ball of cells. So you go from 2 cells to 4 cells to 8 cells to 16 cells to 32 to 64, blah, blah, blah. So you have this exponential growth. So you can take a ball of those cells, and you can take a cell that should be destined to be the heel of your foot and move that cell to a brain cell. The cell that should have been your heel turns into a brain cell, and the cell that should have been a brain cell turns into your heel. And we don't understand all those steps and the various communication. And so you back up on genetics. One of the areas that's been studied in homosexuality are twins. And so you could argue if it was genetic, if you've got genetically identical twins, how is it that sometimes one twin is LGBTQ and one is not? And, it's questions like that that scientists tackle. What we know about genetics, there's been a hunt for the genes that cause homosexuality.
There's been a hunt, but they have not captured the answer.
Right.
So that's interesting. Now, I don't want to get away from the subject, but just out of curiosity, there's been a lot of studies here we're talking about in the animal world about whether or not this is natural. And there are other things that are human and that I wonder, do those same emotions, those same things happen in the animal world? Are there studies like that too? For example, are there studies that show that animals show jealousy? Or
definitely.
other types of emotions. Are those studies that people have been doing as well?
I would say probably the two authors which immediately come to my mind are a zoologist, animal behaviorist by the name of Patricia McConnell, who used to be on National Public Radio and Wisconsin Public Radio.
I remember that.
Yeah,
name.
she wrote a book titled For the Love of a Dog, and it's all about emotions in dogs.
Oh.
And then the world's authority is an interesting woman with autism.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Temple Grandin. But, one of the many letters behind my name is DCLAM, which means I'm a diplomate of the American College of Laboratory Animal Medicine, which in essence means I'm an animal policeman for the use of animals behind the closed doors of research. And you can know as a citizen that the animals behind the closed doors of research are well taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of like in movies where they say no animals were harmed, you are that for research.
We're talking about whether or not this is a natural thing that occurs in animals. Where are we in that regard? Do we have some definitive answers?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, again, I would say to your listeners, here there are multiple species. I think penguins are the most noteworthy. That another wonderful book is a book titled Dr. Tatiana's Sex Advice to All Creation. And the author, I'm spacing her name, but anyway, she wrote kind of the authoritative book on the evolutionary biology of sex. And again, if you back up even further, if you look at the last 40 years of Nobel Prizes in either medicine or physiology, there's only one of those Nobel Prizes that didn't involve the use of animals.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Barbara McClintock's work working with corn and transposable genetic elements. But animals and research in animals is the way we get to the truth.
Well, maybe on a different podcast you can talk about that, working with corn. If you are, I'm all ears.
There's Joe. I love the guy.
Let's say somebody comes, they're listening to this podcast and they say, well, how do I know that what you're saying is true? Okay, so you say that we see it. What are the facts? Are there some things that you can pull out from the
I'd be happy
here?
to. That if we look at the paper titled Sexual Partner Preference in Animals and Humans, I'll just read from the abstract. It says, this presentation reviews available evidence indicating that these different mechanisms play a significant role in the control of sexual partner preference in animals and humans. In other words, the homosexual versus heterosexual orientation. Clinical and epidemiological studies of phenotypically selected populations indicate that early actions of hormones and genetic factors clearly contribute to the determination of sexual orientation. The maternal embryonic environment also modifies the incidence of male homosexuality via immunological mechanisms. The relative contribution of these mechanisms remains, however, to be determined.
Okay. Now, for those of us that are not well versed in reading academic literature, tell me what that means in English.
Well, we return to that Venn diagram that, they talk about hormones, specifically testosterone during gestation. They talk about genetics and androgen environment influenced and then environments. The bottom line is, why would you choose to potentially be excommunicated from your family, from your church?
Right. We've talked about that before. I'd say that's not something that you'd say, gee, things are going great. I think I'm going to change.
The data shows that sexual orientation occurs later in gestation. It's not what is in your pants. It's what's between your ears.
Mm-hmm. Right. I've heard that many times. That's what you're saying is what we've been talking about for quite a while, and that is that it really isn't a choice that I can choose to go this way or that way. The body's already made that decision which way it wants to go, and you can fight it, but the decision has been made. What is the final message you would like to bring to our listeners? Our listeners are here looking for some kind of direction that says, this is what I know. This is in my studies what I have discovered, and here are some facts I know for sure.
Well, I guess I'd return where we started, that, is homosexuality natural? And the answer is yes. And then the proof, does homosexuality occur in animals? The answer is yes.
And you said, how many different species did you mention? 400?
I want to say 487.
Well, all right. Well, this is good to know. And there's so many people that will use that argument as a weapon to hurt people in the LGBTQ community and to say, well, it's not natural, and to shame and make people feel really, really bad. And your message here today is that's not right, because we see it. Anything that science has to say is saying that it's not unnatural. And we should expect that if we see this in the animal kingdom, that we would see it among ourselves as well. We have referenced this interview that we did with Pete Gasper probably dozens of times since we did this one. This is one of our most important episodes, I think, because so many people think, well, that's so unnatural to be gay, and it's not even close to it. And that's why this is so important, that we understand that not only is it not unnatural, but we actually see it all throughout everything, and all the research is actually saying that it's actually very unnatural to try to keep gay and lesbian and LGBTQ people as a whole from being ourselves. It's one of the worst things that you can do. This is just one other point of data, one other piece of evidence that builds the overall case for full acceptance.
It's not only full acceptance, but it's full affirmation. We're affirming here that this absolutely is a completely natural thing in our entire world. And I would personally like to thank Dr. Gasper again for coming on here and doing this for us. even though it occurred more than 3 years ago, the message is still very powerful.
And the message right now is going all over the world.
Yes, it certainly is. As a matter of fact, we are now in 73 countries. And that excites me to know that we're in 73 countries and places like you wouldn't even imagine we'd be in, like Saigon, for example, or like Ho Chi Minh City, like places in Russia, places in Madagascar, worldwide.
We're really excited to see the word go forth because it's really important. It is not like LGBTQ issues are confined to the United States. This is a natural thing that occurs everywhere, and we're grateful that people are listening all over. If you want to keep in touch with what we're doing, you can sign up for our email newsletter. It's called the Transcendent Dispatch. You can go to dispatch.transcendent.com or click the link in the description. We think that'll be good for you to keep in touch with what we're doing. We'll let you know about some of the episodes that will be coming up soon. And with that,
We'll see you Monday.
Did you hear about the guy that the hacker called him up and he said, "I've got all of your passwords"?
No kidding.
The guy went and he got a pen and paper and he said, "Thank God for that. What are they?"